And Jude, if you can take out the CD, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sunday service. Happy holiday weekend to you. Good to be in the space of learning and discovery. Always a joy to be here. Always an honor to share these teachings with you. I feel like I'm a kid that gets to play with his favorite toys every Sunday and share them. So thanks for being on this play date with me. We're going to be looking today at something that we touched on last week. We were looking at this sudden enlightenment experience. We spent a lot of time in Chan Buddhism or Chinese Zen, right? It's Chan. And we were seeing how we are all in constant touch or communication with our deepest nature, which is the ground of being. And we had used that poem from Rumi, "I'll meet you in a field beyond right or wrong." And when we lay down in this grass, the idea of other becomes a laughable notion, that there's no duality here. There is just the allness of who we are together in this non-dual state of pure knowing and pure love. And so we have this experience at the ground or heart of our being, right, our deepest nature. It's who we are. And yet, oftentimes we find ourselves disconnected from that, estranged from that, completely bewildered and lost and unaware of that. And so the spiritual journey and all of the different traditions have their own methodologies and techniques to elicit or cultivate this reconnection or this reintegration into the ground of being. And so it's very important that we don't miss this, because oftentimes, we got on a nice spiel last week about going beyond right and wrong, no good or evil, like just get back into the non-dual. But we can also do a spiritual bypassing when we get that direction or instruction in a half-baked or distorted way. If there's no right or wrong and everything is illusion, then we have carte blanche to show up any way we want within the human expression. And that can actually compound our suffering and compound our guilt, because we're acting blindly and we're actually going against the deep structure of reality. It was Buddha that said that this universe is basically finely tuned or calibrated in a moral direction. In other words, it's calibrated towards the good. So if you've ever recognized that the universe actually has at its deepest essence a movement towards what is harmonious, beneficial, symbiotic, like things are reflecting that all the time. The universe has a sharing principle, a unity principle at its heart. And then when we go against that, we begin to bring disharmony, dis-ease, and chaos into our life. And oftentimes we're unaware of the fact that we're doing that in our thought, speech, and action. So we want to look at the fact that there is this non-dual, immediate, sudden enlightenment that is available every moment. It's who we are. We'll never not be that. And yet the paradox or the irony is we must cultivate it. We must discover it. So it lays within a seed potential. It's a latent state. Jesus told that parable about the sower that went out to sow, and he sowed all of these seeds. Some fell on good ground, some on rocky soil, some on the roadside, etc. And he later explained to his disciples that the seed that was sown was the Logos, was the Word, was this deep structure of enlightenment that permeates all of the universal experience. Right? And human beings can graft themselves into this deep structure. We are that. We have the potential to be that. But as Jesus said, some of that seed fell on a rocky ground, and the birds of the air came and ate it up immediately. And he said, the ground is the heart. So the good ground is the open heart, the heart that has pruned itself or cultivated itself and created an environment conducive to the growth of that seed. Other ground did not cultivate. It's rocky or it's thorny. And so the seed doesn't take root or it doesn't last long. And that's the idea behind what we're going to talk about today, that as he says in A Course in Miracles, the updated gospel, that miracles are everyone's birthright, but purification is necessary first. So in other words, we have to prune and cultivate our heart in order to know our inheritance, which is always already the case. So paradoxical, but yet logical and understandable. So we're going to look primarily today through the lens of Sufism. It's a wonderful tradition, and it has deep psychological benefit when we look at some of the things that we're going to explore today. We'll be looking primarily at this notion of the need for guidance, right? So how do we find magnetic north? How do we begin to cultivate this inward journey? How do we discern what is right and wrong in order to prepare the pure heart? So there's the guidance aspect of that. What's this journey entail? It entails looking at ourselves, right? It entails looking at the way we are currently thinking and being in the world. And so another major part of our discussion this morning is through the lens of Sufism to look at what is referred to there as the primary and secondary narcissisms. Really wonderful teaching. I think you'll enjoy it. So why don't we get into it by first getting into the breath and arriving in this instant, not the concept of now, but the living, pulsing, breathing, vital now. There's that beautiful poem from Hafiz which says that we are the cup or the vessel, and grace is the pitcher that wants to pour the water into us. And so in order to receive this downpour of grace, we, as the vessel, must be still. And so we give the next 50 minutes or so to cultivating this stillness within the heart and this openness to the influx or downpour of grace for the benefit of all beings. And so it is. We're going to begin today with an excellent book, The Heart of Sufism by Hazrat Inayat Khan, and a little bit on divine guidance here, the spirit of guidance. There are some who receive knowledge from the divine mind indirectly, and some who receive it directly. In those souls which happen to receive the central current of the spirit of guidance, the spirit of prophecy is conceived. The messengers of all times, of whom we hear in the histories and traditions of the world, have been souls in whom the central current of the divine light has functioned. In other words, the prophets of all ages have been the reflections of the divine mind on earth. No one has ever seen God, and if the evidence of God's existence has ever been manifested, it was in human form, reflecting God. Apart from all that the prophets have taught, it was their personality which proved their prophecy. In their thought, speech, and word, they reflected God, which was more than morals, doctrines, and teachings could do. So let's really focus on that last sentence, because it's going to be the leitmotif, this current that's going to be running through our conversation this morning. Apart from all that the prophets have taught, it was their personality which proved their prophecy. So in other words, total integration of the outer man with the inner man. Total honesty, transparency, integrity with the ground of being and the personality structure. See, this is what makes an enlightened being. The enlightened being is willing to undergo what Rumi would call the wine press of God, where there is this purgation, this removing of any obstacles or blocks or impurities within the personality that are keeping it from being a clear mirror of that divine current flowing through it. And he says it nicely in A Course in Miracles. He says to all of us that God is constantly flowing around us, but God also wants to flow through us. And it's the egoic structure within the personality that blocks the flow through us. So what the ego is doing is it's generating, and we're going to see this more closely in a few minutes, it's generating a cocoon of ideas and opinions and beliefs, feelings and memories that are out of alignment or out of accord with the reality of that divine current. And so even if some of it gets in, the ego will distort those impulses and basically hijack them to keep it within its own storyline of who it is as a personality. And so the spiritual journey is having to, like Patanjali says in the Yoga Sutras, having to undergo this deep introspection where you begin to really look at yourself as this construct of beliefs and opinions and ideas that have been accumulated and accreted over time. And through this divine guidance, you begin to actually weigh and sort out what is in alignment or what can go into alignment with the divine guidance or divine current, and what is completely out of alignment. The vices, the non-virtuous or unwholesome qualities, they eventually must be expurgated, thrown away, right? Dissolved. So that just like the fully enlightened being, we become a coherent reflection of the divine current. Nothing's blocking it, right? So a few poems from Hazrat Inayat Khan. This one is called Rasul, and that's the Arabic term for prophet. So, Rasul, warner of coming dangers, awakener of the world from sleep, deliverer of the message of God, you are the Savior, the sun at the dawn of creation, the light of the whole universe, the fulfillment of God's purpose. You, the life eternal. We seek refuge in your loving enfoldment, spirit of guidance, source of all beauty, and creator of harmony. Love, lover, and beloved Lord, you are the divine ideal. So this is the potential, this is the seed, this is the template within the divine mind that wants to manifest fully in all minds. This is that seed of the word or logos that gets spread in all hearts. We all have it already. So one of the great insights that Mahayana Buddhism brought to the world of Buddhism, because if you're not familiar, Buddhism first started out in a Theravada approach where it was isolating yourself from the world, becoming a monk, renouncing the world, going into the forest, and cultivating nirvana, going through all these stages of deep absorption until eventually you either become a stream enterer, in other words, you start to pick up that current, and you'll come back to continue your work when you drop the body, or you'll become a once returner. You'll pick up that current, but because you've done such deep work in this life, you'll only have to come back one more time, or you'll pick up that current and become what's called a non-returner. So you don't have to come back into this density and chaos of the lower world. You can finish your sadhana, your spiritual practice, and tapoloka, satyaloka, brahmaloka, these higher heavens, right, where things are more conducive to spiritual practice. No insects, no extreme temperatures, no temptations of any kind. You can really absorb. So that's the non-returner. Or you can become the arhat. And the arhat was the one who had supreme samyak sambodhi, the supreme enlightenment, right? That was Theravada Buddhism. Self-cultivation. Mahayana Buddhism came along about 400 years after Theravada was on the planet, and it basically began to say that it's not just for the individual. Hinayana is the pejorative term that these Mahayana believers gave to the Theravadan tradition, which means it's a little ferry boat. It's only big enough to take one person across the river of existence into nirvana. We're the Mahayana. We're the big ferry boat. In other words, our teaching is for all beings. That's why compassion was a huge factor within the Mahayana tradition. May all beings be liberated and free, because all beings have what's called the Tathagata Garbha, this divine potential within them. This was the Mahayana idea. Everyone was Buddha. You don't get that in Theravada. You get that in Mahayana. Everyone's Buddha, but they have to cultivate that Buddha nature, right? So this is what the Mahayana did, and what we see then is that it's a divine ideal, whether it's in the Rasul of Islam as Muhammad being the divine ideal, or Jesus as the Logos, or the Son of God as the divine ideal, Moses or Moshe in the Jewish tradition as the divine ideal, Lao Tzu, Zhuangzi. All of these people are representatives or reflections of this higher image, what is called in Sufism the perfect human. And so we all have that. It's a matter of developing it. Not to belabor the idea, but to make it clear. Praise be to you, most supreme. Oh, wait, is this it? No, it's this one. This one is called Salat or Prayer. Most gracious Lord, Master, Messiah, and Savior of humanity, we greet you with all humility. You are the first cause and the last effect, the divine light and the spirit of guidance, Alpha and Omega. Your light is in all forms, your love in all beings, and a loving mother and a kind father, in an innocent child, in a helpful friend, in an inspiring teacher. Allow us to recognize you in all your holy names and forms, as Rama, as Krishna, as Shiva, as Buddha. Let us know you as Abraham, as Solomon, as Zarathustra, as Moses, as Jesus, as Muhammad, and in many other names and forms known and unknown to the world. We adore your past. Your presence deeply enlightens our being, and we look for your blessing in the future. O Messenger, Christ, Nabi, the Rasul of God, you whose heart constantly reaches upward, you come on earth with a message as a dove from above when Dharma decays, and you speak the word the Logos, that is put into your mouth as the light fills the crescent moon. Let the star of the divine light shining in your heart be reflected in the hearts of those who love you. May the message of God reach far and wide, illuminating and making the whole humanity as one single brotherhood in the fatherhood and motherhood of God. Amen. So it's important what he had just said about those who love you, may we be reflections of you. And so this is what is part of that sorting out process is, do you love your ego more than you love the divinity within you? So this is the journey, really. It's a journey through these layers of our personality where we have a choice to remain in a selfish state of body identity and clinging to our little life, or opening it, surrendering it, becoming more vulnerable to this working of the divine current within us, so that it opens us up beyond the ego and we begin to realize we're a universal light being. That's where we will find the fulfillment that we are seeking within the human experience that can never be found. It's by actualizing this potential. And in order to do that, we have to touch into these secret spaces within the ego that remain hidden and obscured under the cover of the surface personality. So this is where we're going to go next. We're going to kind of lay out the map. Okay, we're gonna look at the teachings of Ibn al-Arabi. He's considered to be the greatest Sufi known, if that means anything to you. It's saying a lot. He was a great genius, and we're going to touch in on something that happened to him when he was very young. It's a little anecdote of when Ibn al-Arabi was just a teenager, as he says, before he could even grow a beard. He went on retreat, and he had what's called a makia, an opening. And this opening is when he had full realization of who he is. He saw the universe as it truly is in all of its dimensions, and he knew the source of it all in that experience. And it was that flash of awakening that he took with him all of his life, and he wrote books and books and books. And he said, all that I've written, all that I've given was just a whisper of what I experienced from when I was a little boy. Much like Carl Jung, when Carl Jung had the experience that he categorized or recorded in the Red Book, where he took this dive into the collective unconscious, and he met there the denizens of the unconscious, and he was guided in quite a remarkable way. It was Jung that said all of his analytics and all of his deep psychology came out of the earliest strata, his experience with his own deep unconscious, recorded in the Black Books and the Red Book. Sri Aurobindo, same thing, had the experience when he was in jail, total awakening into nirvana. He was ripe and ready, and then from there, everything that flowed from his pen and was given to others was just, again, an aspect, a whisper of that deeper realization that he encountered. So a little bit about Ibn al-Arabi, just a quick little anecdote. This actually, he was alive in the 1200s, and this event took place around 1248. He meets Averroes, and Averroes was the rock star of his era. He was the intellectual above and beyond all intellectuals of his day. I don't know if you've ever studied medieval philosophy in college or anything like that. You definitely had to come across Averroes. His Arabic name is Ibn Rushd, and this is a little bit about Ibn Rushd meeting the very young, beardless Ibn al-Arabi. Ibn Rushd was eager to meet me, because of what he had heard and what had reached him concerning what God had opened up for me in my retreat. I was still a youth. My face had not yet put forth a beard, and my mustache had not yet grown. When I entered in upon him, he stood up in his place out of love and respect. He embraced me and said, "Yes." I said, "Yes." His joy increased because I had understood him. Very subtle exchange here. Keep in mind, Averroes, or Ibn Rushd, wants to know God above all else. He's going through rationalist philosophy, but his heart is burning to wake up. And so he can catch, like Ramakrishna said, a hemp smoker can recognize another hemp smoker. And so when Ibn al-Arabi walks in, he could see there's the frequency. There's something there that he knows was there. So yes, yes. His joy increased because I had understood him. Then I realized why he had rejoiced at that. So I said, no. In other words, ego got in the way. So this is how we can easily distort the spiritual current. So Ibn al-Arabi was so open and sensitive, there was the immediate recognition by Ibn Rushd. But then his thoughts and his views and his beliefs and what it was going to be like and all of this internal commentary due to the excitement. And then Ibn al-Arabi said, no, that's not it. His joy disappeared. And his color changed, and he doubted what he possessed in himself. I mean, he's a rock star, right? Can't express that enough. A mountain of a man, of a personality, of a thinker. And all of that was for naught in comparison to this that was before him. This light, this current. He said, how did you find the situation in unveiling and divine effusion? Is it what rational consideration gives to us? I replied, yes and no. Between the yes and no, the spirits fly from their matter and heads from their bodies. His color turned pale, and he began to tremble. He sat reciting, there is no power and no strength but in God, since he has understood my illusion. After that, he sought from my Father to meet me in order to present to me what he himself had understood. He wanted to know if it conformed with or was different from what I had. He was one of the great masters of reflection and rational consideration. He thanked God that in his own time he had seen someone who had entered into the retreat ignorant and come out like this, without study, discussion, investigation, or reading. He said, this is a state that we had confirmed rationally, but we had never seen anyone possessed of it. Praise belongs to God that I should live in the time of one of its possessors, those who have opened the locks upon its doors. Praise belongs to God who singled me out to see him. So this gives you a little taste of Ibn al-Arabi. And this is something that he says about himself in light of this opening. When I kept knocking on God's door, I waited mindfully, not distracted, until there appeared to the eye the glory of his face, and a call to me, nothing else. I encompassed being in knowledge. Nothing is in my heart but God. So that's how he got through the door. This gateless gate that we talked about in Chan, right? The Wu Men Quan, the gateless barrier. This is where you enter into all being. Beyond the little trivialities of the egoic self, you expand into the infinite self, which is the pattern of who we really are, as the Christ or the Buddha or the light of the Mohammedan reality, whatever way you want to say this. So nothing is in my heart but God. Right? That's the purified vessel. You get this same exact statement, pretty much right on verbatim, in A Course in Miracles, where Jesus says something a little confusing at first. He says, equality does not imply homogeneity now. We all have the seed. We're all equal. But we are not homogeneous yet. In other words, we're not at the same awakening of that potential now. That's what time is for. Time is the soil in which the lotus is growing, all at different stages of development, all at different levels of opening. Right? So Jesus will then say, I have nothing in me that is not potential in you. The only difference is I've actualized it. There's nothing in me that is other than God. Right? So again, this is the ground of our being, but it must be actualized. Right? And only a pure heart can see God. It's one of the Beatitudes. Right? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So a little bit now about the terrain. What William Chittick in this amazing book will refer to as cosmic dynamics. Okay, so what's the dynamo? What's the pulse? What's the cosmos up to in its deepest energetic patterning or levels of activity? Okay. So this is Chittick. People may have been created in the divine form, but there is an immeasurable distance, or rather difference, between someone who has brought out the divine knowledge and power, which had previously been latent within himself, and someone else who has remained ignorant and weak. Only human beings, leaving jinn out of the picture. Does everybody know what a jinn is? It's where we get genie from. So in Islamic cosmology, human beings are made of clay, but they carry the spark of divinity. The jinn are made of smokeless fire, and they are a more subtle species. They inhabit our same life space, but because they're so subtle, we don't see them, they see us. And so they have magic powers. They can manifest as human beings or animals. They shapeshift, so they can be benevolent or malevolent. They're tricksters. So there's the jinn, spelled D-J-I-N-N, where we get genie in the bottle, right? From the 40 tales of the Arabian Nights. Only human beings come into the universe as a tremendous potentiality for growth and maturation, but also for deviation, degradation, and deformation. Right? If you don't want the guidance, you can listen to another voice. You have the potential to be divine, but you also have the potential to be demonic. Outwardly, human beings remain human as long as they stay in this world, but inwardly they may become almost anything at all. Angel, truly human, animal, plant, stone, demon, all potentials within the human menu. Human beings do not enter the world as full-fledged divine forms. They start out as a sort of infinite potentiality for actualizing the all-comprehensive name, right? Allah, the name of God, is considered to have all of the energies, all of the powers, all of the potential symbolized within that name. Between the apparition and absolute light stands a yawning chasm, an endless void. True, the apparition in relation to absolute darkness is light, but in effect, it is shadow. So at the beginning, we are empty shells, he's saying. We're like the dimmest reflections on the cave wall. We're shadows with potential unactualized. As we begin to reveal the light within, we begin to move closer to our source and lose more and more of this shadow nature, this illusory nature. We begin to become the soul, embodied. So between the supreme light of God and where we begin our journey, he says there's this yawning chasm that we have to go through a developmental process in order to cross over. Buddha was saying that with the ferry boat, right? Nirvana is when you go from this shore to the far shore. You start in samsara, shadowland, and you end up as the pure being on the other shore of nirvana. Right? You use the teaching or the guidance as the raft to take you across. So, archetypes here. All these traditions are saying this. So this involves a process through which light is intensified and darkness overcome. The dim apparition remains on the wall for all to see. That dim apparition is the body remaining fixed in this physical reality until its death. But the human consciousness travels in the direction of the light. So you can be around the same people that know you as Mike. The body is the same, but you could have traveled light years in your consciousness from the time that they've known you till now. The body stays the same, but your consciousness can undergo endless transmutation and evolution. That's this journey. And then he says this, different people make different choices. Some prefer to play with apparitions. Some seek out various degrees of light. Some turn their gaze to the absolute light and can be satisfied with nothing less. So remember what we were saying, the spiritual practice is deep self-examination. So when we look at ourselves, are we attracted to apparitions? Are we attracted to lesser lights? Or are we attracted to the supreme light? Right? Apparitions are considered the things that are just form, just bodies, objects, material things. Those are the shadows. Those are the ephemeral things. They don't really stay around. They're not worth total investment. But a lot of people are living out their entire human life devoted only to apparitions, right? Others devote themselves to higher ideals, social justice, moralisms, religious external behaviors, etc. These are the lesser lights, right? They're more interiorized than the material objects, but they're lesser lights because they oftentimes keep us in these eddies and rivulets that don't really bring us into the main current. Even if we are staunchly religious, we can be far from the main current. So it's only by being devoted to the supreme light that we begin to align with this deeper potential that we are. Take a breath for a second. Sometimes I feel like that. Remember that guy that used to be the speed talker in the commercials? It's like, I got 1 hour. All right, so bell rings and here I go. So as we move along this inner journey of consciousness, the light, the intensity of the light can begin to increase and grow. And then he says this, all paths do not lead in the direction of absolute light. A person may continue to wander in apparitions in this world and the next, or become transfixed by one of the innumerable interworlds that fill the chasm. So this is one of the things in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It was the goal of the Lama that was sitting by the bedside of the deceased to read the Bardo Total, which is really translated not as the Book of the Dead, but being able to hear when you're in that chasm or Bardo, so that you can receive the spiritual guidance when you're in the interworld. And so you're not beguiled by the apparitions of the lesser lights when you're making your journey into the higher realms, because these lower realms of the chasm can be very convincing and deceptive. And so this is why he's saying some stay transfixed on apparitions in this world, and you always take your state of mind. This is when you start to really get a mature understanding of the spiritual life. You're not going into some immediate, oh, I got my ticket, I'm a Catholic. Here you go, Peter, I'm through the gate. That's helpful to inspire you, but it can also be, like we were saying, getting you stuck in a place that will never bring you to reality. You take your state of mind. Your state of mind is your ticket. If you're stuck on apparitions here, why would you ever think that you're not going to be stuck on apparitions when you shed the mortal coil? You'll just generate more illusions. And you're always going to see your intentions taking form. That was the other thing that the Prophet Muhammad said, that when you go into the next world, you're not actually going to see your good deeds as your good deeds. You're going to see your intention behind the form of the good deed. That's what's going to come visiting you. You're always going to meet yourself. And when you shuffle off the mortal coil, so all of the filters and denials and ways of dodging and hiding go. And you're faced with the rawness of who you are. That's one of the reasons why we're motivated to clean up now. So he says, here we meet the imponderables of human destiny. Few are the human beings who have witnessed the interworlds with the clarity and insight of Ibn al-Arabi and return to map them out. Finally here, when human beings return to God, whether by compulsion or their own free choice, they go by way of the intermediate worlds. Just as this straight path of return can be imagined as an ascent through an ever-increasing intensity of light that opens into the infinite light of God, so also it can be envisaged in terms of many other divine attributes. So to increase in light is to increase in life, in knowledge, desire, power, speech, generosity, justice, and so on. All of these beautiful virtuous qualities get amplified as you change your state of mind and pick up that central current. So it's not myth of worshiping some mythological god. It's cultivating these virtuous characters and living an abundant, fulfilling life with fulfilling relationships because you're releasing the garbage, the toxicity that's been blocking you from that. So this is the process of actualizing all of the divine qualities that are latent within our primordial human nature by virtue of being the divine image. Okay, one more lap to go. Is this helpful? Good? So this book is fantastic. If you're into Sufism and you don't own this book, you want it. It's Physicians of the Heart. It's a study of the 99 names of God. These names are the qualities of God and how to cultivate them in your life. So remember what we said. In order to access this divine potential, we have to look directly at the ego structure, the construct of the personality. Right? That's why when you become spiritually awake, you also begin to become a master psychologist, because you have to know the psyche. You have to know the soul in order to wake up. And you'll learn its tricks, you'll learn how it's been structured and what is holding you back from your full potential. So it says here, remember we were talking about these two different narcissisms, which are two different wounds within the soul. He says, as we explore some aspects of the ego structure by examining the wounds that the ego bears, and by considering some very central issues of self-value, we will see two major wounds. Because of the excruciating sensitivity of these deep wounds, the ego sets out with great determination to defend them, the wounds, from being touched and thereby activated. So in order to get to heaven, you have to go through the hell that the ego doesn't want to look at. Your wounds, your fears, your shame, all of these blocks, that's what bars the way. And remember, these wounds actually make you have very low self-esteem or self-value. And the ego is trying to compensate for that. That's its job. You don't have to heal those wounds. I got you. I'll be your protector. I'll be your guide. So we'll create a world where everybody else is wrong, or a world where you're top dog, or a world where you're the victim and so everybody else has to cater to you. It will always compensate for the wounds, but never heal them. That's its construct. So it sets out with great determination to defend the wounds from being touched and thereby activated. The way you defend your wounds from being touched by the experiences of your life creates and reflects your specific personality structures. Right? So all of our personality structures are reactions to compensating for the wounds that we've incurred along the way, right? Mommy didn't pay attention to me when I was young and crying in the crib with a dirty diaper. I'm going to be an actor. Everybody's going to pay attention to me now, and I'll get the love needs that I didn't have from Mommy by being so rich and famous. Right? So everything becomes a compensation. Our whole personality in these teachings is a way of trying to avoid looking at our wounds and still living a fulfilling life, right? So they touch on the secondary narcissistic wound first, all right? So there's the primary and there's the secondary. So there are two major wounds in the human psyche. What makes this secondary narcissistic wound our self-identification. Sorry, let me just start again. I'm trying to paraphrase. What makes it narcissistic, this secondary narcissistic wound, what makes it narcissistic is our self-identification. Okay, so let me back up. Forgive me. What we call the secondary narcissistic wound arises because we feel shamed. Okay? We feel somehow we have failed to fulfill what our family or society has required of us. Right? So that's the entry point for this secondary narcissistic wound in the psyche. You know, mom and dad got divorced. That's my fault. Dad died. That's my fault. My mom beat me. My mom ignored me. I must have really no value or worth for somebody to treat me like that. Right? That's the wound. Gets better here. Better is the word. What makes it narcissistic is our self-identification with the deficiency of this wounded condition. The result of this identification is that we feel deficient in our sense of self, in the sense of our very soul. So who am I to even move towards God? Like, we might not be saying that verbally, but we'll feel that impression, that overall ennui or lethargy or not inspired or resistant. Sometimes we're not aware that our hostility or resistance to the guidance is, I don't want to touch that wound, man. I don't want to go back and visit that place where I felt that shame and disconnect from my own natural peace when I was a little kid, right? So sometimes we're hearing the message and the ego's like, block it out, distract, get annoyed, because we don't want those wounds getting touched. The result of this identification is that we feel deficient in our very soul because this wound is so tender, it usually is defended by our whole personality structure. We develop strategies so that the wound won't be touched because it is very delicate and vulnerable. It is not like a wound that happened through gross encounters or hurts. It is a wound in the delicateness of the soul. As a child, in our soul, we felt that nobody could see what we were trying to do. We felt like a failure because we were not able to heal mother or to heal father. So children ultimately become wounded in this inner peace, because we're all born with this intrinsic inner peace. Something happens, the wound hits that inner peace, and we lose it. It's the core of who we are, this inner peace. Then when somebody attacks them, they may collapse and become aggressive toward their own selves, or they may become aggressive towards others and start attacking them. Right? So it can play out different ways. You touch somebody's wound, you don't know what it's going to do. It'll come for you, or it might rebound on them. Both kinds of activity, attacking others or attacking yourself, mean that the delicate wound is activated. We could say that all aggression is coming as a defense against deep shame, deep vulnerability, and deep woundedness. And we would further say that everybody is trying to cover up this shame because the pain is so devastating that when they reach it, they don't know how to handle it. It could even lead to suicidal impulses. Okay? So I wanted to bring out this bright and happy message this morning since it's a holiday weekend. I hope you're enjoying this lighthearted easygoing, superficial conversation. But again, I have you for an hour a week, and I want to give you something of value that will actually enrich your life, deepen your insight about how this can all be healed. But in order to heal it, you have to look at it, right? You have to see what's making you tick. Why am I aggressive? Why am I so sad? Why can't I get out of my own way and make things happen? Why are my relationships always breaking down? Why do I never feel fulfilled? These are those places within us that we're talking about this morning. Okay? Wish I had a whole weekend workshop to do this with you, but we can't, so I must move on. When we approach the core, the wound is so raw, so delicate, that some forms of love and compassion may be too thick to use. The wound requires a more delicate frequency of compassion because it is really such a tender wound in the Sacred Heart. So this is why cultivating intimacy with God is vital to healing your wound as a child. This is where it feels like mom and dad left me, or I failed, I'm ashamed. These very delicate parts of the heart or the human psyche need to open up to that gentle love, right? Waiting on God, surrendering, opening to this compassion, feeling that compassion surging in the heart. And we can only spend just a few minutes on the primary narcissistic wound. The primary narcissistic wound is when we feel that we've been wounded by God. So this is what is primary. Why did mommy and daddy divorce? Why did I get molested? Why did I get beat up? Why did I not have enough money growing up? Why was I bullied? All of these things are happening to me. Where are you, God? Why do you not care at all about me? If this is happening to me, then I renounce God. Like, F you. If you're going to leave me in this situation, I don't want to know you. And it's that primary disconnect that you think God did you wrong, right? The wound from humanity is a secondary hurt. Even though it is very devastating for a child, it is a secondary hurt. The primary hurt comes when a person turns to God and says, okay, I understand how my family and society have made me suffer, but why are you persecuting me? You are supposed to be the all-compassionate. There must be something about me that is so bad that it makes you reject me, makes you not protect me or give me divine mercy. Right? So these are the internal impressions that we have in the unconscious, according to the Sufis and other deep psychology. I hate to leave it here, but we actually want to just take a minute or two to maybe just open to that delicate compassion that is actually here, because he says what's missing is that we are blocking out the reality that God answers all of our prayers. If we continue to identify with the wounded condition, we'll never know that the compassion is here to actually wipe away our tears and to heal us. But we have to turn away from our wounds and towards God. This is the only missing part of this puzzle. Do we perpetuate our wounded identity, maybe continue to wound ourselves, or even try to wound others as a way of compensation? Or do we give up that project and turn to the compassionate, healing presence of the divine self? Right? So I hope that you take that into your practice this week, and I hope it serves you well. The blue bag's going to go around. If you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, you can click the link and donate to the 8 a.m. service, and for that we thank you for your support. Any thoughts? Yes. Oh, good. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Go through the, yeah. At the center of the wound is the gold. Yeah. Okay, great. We bless the offering. We charge it with the intention that it be a change of everyone's state of mind that is influenced by this offering and its power and its force in whatever form it may be, that they begin to cultivate a life of conscious awareness and love and compassion. And so it is. Amen. Final thoughts here, last 30 seconds. Good. Okay, let's stand, seal the deal. Resting within this heart of awareness, being fully awake in the present moment, and in this unconditioned space of pure witnessing, we know that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Beautiful day, beautiful holiday. Hope to see you back again next week. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Course in Miracles tomorrow night, 7:15. We're here.